Hey everyone, it's Jacqueline for Pixie Dust PhD. The end of the calendar year approaches, which means it is time. The 2023 annual dues have been assessed. In this video, we will go over those 2023 annual dues costs, but also some more interesting trends like the percent increase year over year, as well as the compound annual growth rate. Plus, we'll take a look at the operating budget for my home resort to get a better sense of where these increases may be coming from. Spoiler alert, annual dues went up quite a bit this year. If you're interested, stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. I really appreciate your engagement with the channel. Don't forget to like the video if you find it helpful and subscribe to the channel. Once you're subscribed, you can ring the bell icon to receive notifications whenever I upload new videos. Previously on the channel, we have gone over annual dues in more depth. If you'd like more background about what annual dues even are, please check out those videos. I will leave links in the descriptions down below. But as the briefest of summaries or overviews, you can kind of think of them like a homeowners association. Disney Vacation Club is a timeshare, so once you buy in and you are an owner, you literally do own a teeny tiny piece of property. Therefore, you pay annual dues on your little bit of that property in order to help with upkeep and such. If you already are an owner and you'd like to pay off your annual dues in one lump sum, that technically is due January 15th. I also already have a video on the channel showing you the process of paying annual dues in one lump sum online. If you're interested, I will also leave that link in the description below. Paying in one lump sum is not the only option though. You can pay monthly if you qualify. With that brief overview of annual dues information out of the way, let's move on to the 2023 annual dues. It's worth noting that annual dues are assessed out to the 4th decimal place. What I will show you is only to the 2nd because I think of them in terms of dollars and cents, and most people are more accustomed to thinking about that in terms of 2 decimal places. So I have rounded things, they are not perfectly exact. Also, I did receive notice for my annual dues at my home resort, Bay Lake Tower, but I don't own anywhere else, so I did not have that information directly. Thanks so much to dvcnews.com for posting that information for everyone to see. Based on engagement in the channel, so what you tell me you all are interested in the comments down below, we will be focusing on theme park locations. So we're not really going to talk about Vero Beach, Hilton Head, or Aulani. And even when that data is sometimes shown, please do note that I'm ignoring the subsidized dues at Vero Beach and Aulani. Some folks do have subsidized dues, those contracts are few and far between those, so we're focusing on the non-subsidized dues when that data is available. And finally, tables I'm going to show you in this video are fairly data rich, but we're going to move through them fairly quickly. Please feel free to pause whenever you need, or you can adjust the playback speed to be slower in your YouTube settings. Additionally, there are timestamps in the description below if you want to refer to those to jump back and forth around the video. All right, let's get into it. Very basically, first here are the 2023 annual dues alphabetically by resort. And here you can see the annual dues numbers, but this is not the most interesting to me, so let's go ahead and move on to something more interesting. Here now I've sorted the annual dues by price per point. This year, annual dues range from about $7.33 per point all the way up to almost $13 per point. As per usual, Vero Beach and Hilton Head are the top 2 most expensive. Aulani also creeps up there. These are all beach resorts. It does take a lot of maintenance to keep the buildings nice. Sometimes people are so surprised that the Animal Kingdom Villa's dues are so high, especially since the initial purchase price and the points rate is pretty good, fairly low. Again, there's a lot of line items that go into annual dues, but it is worth pointing out that the Animal Kingdom Villas does have the animal care line item that none of the other resorts have. That obviously costs some money. As of 2023, only 5 resorts are left that have annual dues less than $8 per point. There are 6 resorts that are between $8 and $9 per point, and then the rest are all $9 or higher. Zooming in then, let's just look at theme park locations. A vast majority of these are in the Walt Disney World Resort area. I have italicized Grand Californian as that is over in Disneyland. Here now the overall range of annual dues shrinks down quite a bit when you remove Hilton Head and Vero Beach. The bottom is the same, $7.33, but we now top out at under $10. The highest theme park resort annual dues cost is $9.36 per point at Old Key West. Next, let's look at the 2023 annuals dues compared to the 2022 annuals dues. So here are the pure numbers. But even more interesting, in my opinion, is the difference between the 2022 and 2023 annuals dues. You can see when you're doing this purely mathematically, dollars and cents, that every resort was under a $1 increase. Less than $1 really doesn't sound that bad, but if you have a several hundred point contract, that's gonna add up pretty fast. But again, zooming in on just those theme park locations, now the range is even smaller. The difference between the 2022 and 2023 annuals dues for theme park locations was 12 cents to 63 cents per point. There are 6 resorts though that were more than 50 cents per point, so more than half a dollar. But instead of looking at the pure difference in dollars and cents, let's then look at a percent change. Of the theme park locations, Beach Club had the highest difference in dollars and cents between 2022 and 2023. It also has a very high percent change at over 8%. 5 Disney Vacation Club resorts saw percent change over 7%, and only one of these is Vero Beach. The rest are theme park locations. Riviera is down at the bottom at under 1.5%. This makes sense to me as the annual dues debuted at what I would consider to be a fairly high rate, and this is only the 5th year of annual dues being assessed. In my opinion, because of that overall higher initial set rate for annual dues, Riviera has seen very small increases year to year. But other than Riviera, every resort saw at least a 4% increase compared to 2022. And in my opinion, a 3 to 5% change is pretty average, very normal, but most resorts saw even more than that. Focusing then just on the theme park Disney Vacation Club resorts, again, you've got Riviera at the bottom and Beach Club at the top. That did not change. 6 of these resorts saw a 6% or more percent change from the 2022 to the 2023 annual dues. That's pretty significant. But looking at the percent increase between 2022 and 2023 doesn't really tell the full picture, particularly if you're newer to Disney Vacation Club. So now let's take this percent change that we've been looking at between 2022 and 2023 and compare it to the percent change between 2021 and 2022. A few of the resorts did see pretty similar percent change bumps between the 2 years, but for example, Beach Club at the top saw over 8% this year, but just a teeny tiny bit the prior. The Polynesian, also last time we talked about annual dues coming out, was in that standard, 4 to 5% range, and now it's approaching 8%. In 2022 compared to 2021, Boulder Ridge and Copper Creek saw next to no increase. I was pretty surprised about that. You can see now it's still an okay amount in the mid 4%, but maybe they're making up for that a little bit. Providing you this additional context on the percent change year over year of annual dues, I hope gives you a better picture of why this year seems especially stark compared to prior years. Let's next look at the compound annual growth rate for the annual dues at the resorts. Very basically, the compound annual growth rate is a way to calculate the mean annual growth over a period of time. I've gone over this in more detail in a prior video, specifically looking at Vero Beach and Hilton Head. If you want to really learn more about compound annual growth rate and how to apply that to Disney Vacation Club, please check that video out. I will link it in the description below. But essentially, it's a mathematical formula that takes the beginning value into account, which would be the annual dues at the opening year, the final value, which for us would be annual dues in 2023, and then the time, so the time in years between opening and 2023. When we calculate out this compound annual growth rate for the Disney Vacation Club resorts, the range you get is pretty wide, from about 0.5% to slightly over 5%. Grand Californian's at the top there at almost 5.1%. This means on average, every year the annual dues increase about 5%. There, of course, is variance year to year. Like you've seen these past couple years, it's higher, but when you're looking at the lifetime of the contract, that's kind of what you come out to in general. The big takeaway, and in my opinion, the good news here, is that even though a lot of resorts saw very high percent increases this year in 2023 compared to the 2022 annual dues, the compound annual growth rate is still fairly normal. You're still sitting in that 3 to 5% range for most places. Focusing more on those theme park locations, the range stays the same. You've got Riviera at the bottom and Grand Californian at the top. 6 of these resorts' annual dues have compound annual growth rates between 3% and 4%, which feels very normal to me, and again, a little bit reassuring when you're looking at the compound annual growth rate as opposed to just the 1-year increase. I do want to emphasize though that compound annual growth rate does literally take time into account. It is part of the formula. So resorts that haven't been open as long don't factor this time component in as heavily. Riviera, Copper Creek, and Grand Floridian are all the bottom 3 of this chart, so the lowest compound annual growth rates, which is good, but they are also some of the younger resorts. For example, Riviera's only had 5 years of annual dues assessed. As time goes on, I would definitely expect these compound annual growth rates to grow in that 3 to 5% range. You can see that the Polynesian is already there 9 years in. It's pretty undeniable though that for 2023 annual dues, we've seen the general trend of an increase across the board. There's a lot of economic factors that go into it. Certainly inflation overall was very high this year. I'm sure that plays a part. But also, let's just take a look at the operating budget to explain some of this. My home resort is Bay Lake Tower, so I do receive detailed information about the Bay Lake Tower operating budget. Let's look at 2023 compared to 2022. These cost components are line items in your annual dues. Some of them are extremely small, not even a cent per point, for example. But when you add them all up, that is how you get your annual dues numbers. Between 2022 and 2023, some of these cost components appear to basically stay the same or even go down a little bit, but there are a handful that increased for sure. Housekeeping went up a decent amount, which is to be expected, and I certainly am more than happy for my annual dues to go towards paying these people a better wage. Maintenance, member activities, transportation, and utilities all also increased. This all also just makes perfect logical sense to me. There are other components assessed that are part of your annual dues, but when we're looking at these line items, if you add those up, then you get your total operating expenses. And again, even though many of these are small changes, when you add it up, it does make a difference. So you can see a pretty big change between 2022 and 2023 operating expenses. At Bay Lake Tower, this increased over 6%. I don't have simple access to this detailed budget for the other resorts, so that's why I'm using Bay Lake Tower, my home resort, as an example. It'll vary at every resort. They're all assessed separately, but the point is you can see that the operating expenses did increase a meaningful amount. Once again, hat tip to dvcnews.com that did report some high-level takeaways for other resorts. For example, the change in the Polynesian Villas and Bungalows operating expenses increased over 9%. And over at Beach Club, it was closer to 11.5%. So I'm sure that there were some resorts that it was much lower, 3%, 4%, something we're more used to, but you can see a handful of them definitely increased a good amount, which then translates to sort of the overall dues increasing quite a bit. And within that overall operating expenses category, there is one other line item I wanted to shout out, and that is insurance. Insurance alone as its own line item really is not that expensive. At Bay Lake Tower, it's still under 20 cents a point. But here's a clear cost component where you can see big differences year over year. At Bay Lake Tower, it increased over 50% from 2022 to 2023. And DVC News reported that over at Saratoga Springs Resort, the cost of this insurance component increased more than 80% compared to 2022. Yes, some of these still are overall small amounts, but when you're seeing more than 50% jumps year over year, that adds up pretty fast. Moving back to the data tables, let's return to alphabetical by resort. Here, I'm showing you the pure cost of your annual dues per point, as well as the percent increase from last year and that overall compound annual growth rate. Let's pluck out the top and bottom three in each of these categories. Bay Lake Tower, Grand Floridian, and Saratoga Springs in dollars and cents is the cheapest annual dues per point. In contrast, Hilton Head, Old Key West, and Vero Beach are the most expensive annual dues in 2023. Again, that's dollars per point. For percent change in annual dues comparing 2023 rates to 2022 rates, Riviera, Copper Creek, and Boulder Ridge fared the best. Beach Club, Polynesian, and Vero Beach saw the biggest percent change year over year. And zooming out from this 1 or 2 year look at annual dues, looking more at the overall lifetime of the resort, then let's look at the top and bottom three compound annual growth rates of those annual dues. Riviera, Copper Creek, and Grand Floridian have the lowest compound annual growth rate for their annual dues, but again, do note these are also younger resorts. The highest annual dues compound annual growth rate goes to Bay Lake Tower, Grand Californian, and Vero Beach. Taking a look at these winners and losers, you can see that Vero Beach brings the group down, and Hilton Head has an entry in there too. Even though Aulani does not have a top or bottom entry here, let's go ahead and take those resorts out and zoom in on the theme park resorts. Now looking at top and bottom three for these categories of only the theme park DVC locations. In that prior table, the top three for all of these categories was always a theme park location, so those have not changed. By getting rid of Hilton Head and Vero Beach though, we've made some room to add some resorts into these least desirable rankings. Animal Kingdom and Boardwalk join Old Key West as the top three most expensive annual dues per point assessed in 2023. For percent change year over year, Beach Club and the Polynesian are now joined by the Grand Californian. And removing Vero Beach in the compound annual growth rate category makes room for Old Key West to be on the higher end of things here in the top three least desirable, highest compound annual growth rates of its annual dues. And now you can see that two of these least favorable rankings are at Grand Californian. I know many viewers of this channel are much more engaged in Walt Disney World than they are in Disneyland, and also getting a Grand Californian contract is extremely hard. So let's take Grand Californian out and see what we come up with. Now in that year over year percent change, Saratoga Springs jumps out as one of the higher percent changes here. This is for resorts located at Walt Disney World. And the third highest compound annual growth rate for resorts located at Walt Disney World goes to Animal Kingdom, but it's under 4%, so really that's not too bad, I think. If you already own a Disney Vacation Club home resort contract or multiple, I hope that this information has been helpful. Perhaps that look at compound annual growth rate has dampened some of your nerves when looking at the high year over year percent change. If you don't yet own DVC but are thinking about it, this is a realistic look at annual dues. Some years they do just go up a ton, other years it's not very much, but when you're looking at the big picture of thing, the lifetime of the contract, it should balance out to not be outrageous. And also remember that annual dues are assessed on a per point basis. So even though say $7 and change doesn't sound like very much for annual dues, that's per point. Even if you're looking at buying a small contract like 50 points, you're still paying several $100s a year in annual dues, and that number is just going to increase. But if you're looking at buying a more average size contract, say 160 points or even higher, remember to factor annual dues into your budgeting. Particularly if you plan on keeping your contract for 30 plus years, you're just going to end up paying a ton in annual dues, more than your initial purchase price almost surely. I'm not saying this to detract anyone from Disney Vacation Club. I own it. I think it definitely can make sense for you if you want to invest in your future vacations. But it's absolutely worth noting for budgeting, and I hope these types of videos help you think about that. Thanks again to all the lovelies who've liked the video and subscribed to the channel. I super appreciate it. May the rest of your day be magical, and we'll see you real soon at Pixie Dust PhD.